All right, guys. In the last class, we looked at AWS EC2, all right? And I remember we deployed a server. We were trying to connect to it using the CLI, which is a CMD. But we had an issue. We couldn't download the Git batch. The network also was a bit slow. All right, but I've been able to download it. So we're going to see how that works. All right, before we go into other things that I said I was going to talk about, which is the AMI snapshots. All right, and a few other stuff. Okay. All right. So the instance that we had, all right, was deleted. It's not here again. So I have to recreate that instance. And then, of course, the key pair is still there. We've not deleted it. The key pair is here, right here. So if I click on key pairs, all right, this was the key that we created. So it's still here. And I still have my copy also, all right, with me, right? So let me just close this. Okay, so I still have the copy with me. So let me see. Okay, so the copy is still on my system. All right, so we're going to be using, okay, we're still going to be using it. So the copy is still here. So let's see how we can connect to our instance through the CLI. So if you have maybe a terminal window and all of that, so how can you connect? For example, if you don't have PuTTY or Terminus, that we used, all right, in the last class. So you could also use your normal command prompt to also connect to your instance. So let's go to instances. Okay, so let's launch a new instance. Okay, so let's just say this is free class VM. Okay, we can stick with any of this. AWS Amazon Linux is fine, it's okay. So the key pair is right here. All right, and then we change this one to choose the VPC that we created. All right, in the course of the class, an existing subnet, all right, security group rather, we already have that. All right, so that's done. So let's launch the instance. Okay, so instance launched. All right, so let's wait for it to come up. So while we're waiting for this, I will just open up my Git bash. Okay, so there's my Git bash here. All right. Now remember, while we were trying to connect with this instance, it gave us some instructions regarding the key pair, that we need to make sure that the key pair is only readable, right, and not writable. So this option right here, so it was telling us that we need to change the mode, all right. So 400 is just like, all right, just changing the mode to say, you know what, I want to make this particular file only readable, right? It's a Linux command. Okay, so readable. So we have to do this, which I think I have done already. So from here, you can just go to where your key, right, the key file is. So my own is in the downloads folder. All right, it's right here in this folder. So if I do ls, which is a Linux command, or even if I do ll, and then I type in the name of the key, which is here, you can see from here, if you look at the results, that I've actually applied that chmod 400. So it is readable and not writable. So which means if somebody gets a hold of this, the person cannot edit this particular key. That's what it means. So the arrow that you have here basically says this particular key is only readable. So it can be you can read it, but you cannot write it. All right. So that's just a security measure. All right, that has been put in place. So if you want to do that, you just simply do chmod, all right, 400, and then you type the name of your key, and then you press enter, all right, and then it applies that command. So now, how do we log in into this guy? So simply SSH, all right, -hive for interactive. Then you specify your key pair. So that is our key pair. So the username of our instance is EC2. That's the username -user. All right. Then the public IP address is 35. .178.239 and .150. That's the IP address. So I'll press enter. It's asking me, are you sure you want to connect and all of that? So I just say yes. And then we are in, all right, our EC2 instance. So you can see here, this is the EC2 instance. So if I want to test it, if everything is fine, I could just do yum, all right, let's just do yum update. I could just do yum update. Oops, so the command cannot be run. So it's a Linux thing. So you have to do, all right, sudo -i to log in as a root user. All right, so if I do yum update, so that would, all right, check for me, and it tells me right here that then there's nothing to update really, all right, nothing to update. But if I want to install anything just to test, I can just do yum install, let's say yum install git, okay, or maybe just yum install httpd, right? And then I say yes. Yes means to accept all the defaults, and then I press enter. So you can see that indeed our instance is working, it's connected to the internet, and all right, we can start doing a lot of things. So if I want to check what I just installed, I could just do, all right, system CTL status, right, the name of what I just installed, and then it tells me that, okay, it is there, but it's not been started. So if I want to start it, all I need to do just to do again, system CTL, all right, start, then the name of that service, all right. So if I do system CTL status again, the name of the service, all right, it tells me now that the service is, all right, the service is active. Oops, it's telling us that the service is inactive, it's kind of dead. But the most important thing is that, all right, the system is up. All right, what am I checking? Oh, all right, now this is what we're looking for. So the system is active and is running, all right, since this particular time, okay? So everything is working as expected, okay? So those are just a few Linux commands anyway. So that's just to check that our instance is working correctly. Now, if you look at what I did now, I typed a few, codes, and, I had to install a few stuff and all of that. So let's assume that what I just typed in, I want that particular command to run as my system is starting up, right? I want to run that command as my system is starting up. I don't want to come onto the terminal, all right, to type and then type and all of that. I just want to input all of those details so that as the system is starting up, all right, it can run those commands. Now, in the IT world, they call that bootstrapping. All right, so bootstrapping basically is that you want your system to run some script at startup. All right, so that's bootstrapping. So let's see how that works. So let me exit out of this place. Okay, so let me just exit out and go back to my normal system. So let's come back here and let's do some bootstrapping. Now, in AWS, bootstrapping is called user data. All right, in AWS, it is called user data. So basically, there's a section when you're provisioning your EC2, there's a particular section where you can input some commands that you want your system to run at startup. All right, so in EC2, it is called user data. All right, so let me just show us that before we go into the AMI and other stuff. So let's terminate this instance. All right, let's delete it. We don't need it anymore. All right, so I'll go here, terminate. Okay, so did I terminate that? Or so we terminate that. So let's refresh. Let's see what we have. Okay. Oh, okay. So it's terminated. All right. So let's start another one. All right. So let's start up another one. And then this time around, instead of us typing all of those commands, all right, to start it up, we are just going to bootstrap it. And then we're going to check if truly, all right, the bootstrapping stuff actually worked. So let's just call this, all right, free VM, and let's call it HTTPD, right? Okay, so let's go with the Amazon Linux, all right? T2 micro, it's fine. All right, so free class key, that's okay. So edit here to choose the VPC that we created ourselves. All right, that's it there. So existing, all right, choose that. Okay. Now, so how do I provide that, the bootstrapping details, all right, the things that I want my system to run at startup. So how do I provide that detail? So I'll come here to advanced details, right? I'll expand that, and then I will scroll all the way down. So here you have user data. So this user data is where you can type in code or basically batch scripts that you want your system to run the moment you start it up. So the moment I click on launch instance, by the time my system is starting up, it's going to look at, all right, this particular script here, and it's going to run those scripts while it is starting. So why do I do that? Now it's a shell script. So I need to put in hash and then exclamation / bin bash. So basically I am providing it and I'm telling it that this thing that you want to run is a shell script. All right, you want to run a shell script, so you have to put in your hash exclamation / bin / bash. So anything that is after this particular command, it's going to run it. Okay. So now we're using an Amazon Linux 2003 AMI. So basically, we're going to run our commands using yum, right? So let's do sudo. So let's type our commands. So yum update, all right, -y. Okay, we may not even put the update. We can just say yum sudo yum install. So what do we want to install? So httpd, that's what we want to install. All right, and then -y. So once it is installed, we want to start it up. Okay, so we don't need sudo there. So we need sudo. Okay, sudo system ctl. All right, so we want to start it up. Start httpd. Okay, we want to start it up. So once it's started, we want to enable it so that in case we restart the system tomorrow, all right, it should be able to start up by its own self. So httpd. Okay. So what we are basically saying is that by the time the system is starting up, it should look at this place and run this particular script. So it's going to install httpd, it's going to start httpd, and then it's going to enable httpd. So starting it means put it in a running state, and then enabling it means in peradventure the system is stopped and then it started again, right? Make sure that at every time the system is stopped and it started all over again, the HTTPD service starts, all right, you know, at boot time. So which means I don't want to go into the CLI and start it manually every time I stop my instance. Okay, so let's launch the instance and let's see if this is going to work. All right, so launch. It's starting up. So if you look at it here, the IP address has changed. So I need to get my, all right, my SSH right here. So I just need to do, it's still the same key that I'm using, -I, free key. All right, the name is EC2 user at the IP address. So the IP address is 18.130.235.247. All right, that's the IP address. So I press enter and then yes. Okay, let's see. Oh. So we're in. Okay, so we are logged in. So let's verify the things that we have installed if indeed it worked. So how do we verify? So verify saying system CTL, all right, status HTTPD, okay? And all right, our HTTPD was installed successfully. So if you look at it, it was installed and activated 10 seconds ago, all right, 10 seconds ago. So it shows that that little script that we wrote there actually worked, and then it was able to start up the HTTPD automatically. And if you want to view this web server, all you need to do, you can copy the public IP address, paste it here, enter, and you can see that it actually got installed. So it works, all right? That's the result of that web server, because the HTTPD is actually a web server, right? So it worked as we expected. All right, so that's how to bootstrap, all right, on AWS for the EC2 instance Linux server. All right, now let's look at the AMIs. We're going to be looking at the AMI using a Windows machine because We're going to be testing out a few things. Let me just clear this up. We're going to be testing out a few things, all right? So we're going to be checking the AMI using the Windows, all right, AMIs, right? So now, let's launch another instance, but this time around it's going to be a Windows instance, okay? Because we want to practicalize the AMIs, we want to look at snapshots, and want to also look at volumes, all right, within the time that we have. So if I go to launch instance, okay, so let's launch a new one. Okay. All right, so let's launch a new instance. And this time around, we're going for a Windows instance. And also, I'm going to be using a different instance type because I don't want our system to be slow. I want something fast. Of course, it's going to cost me. It's not another free tier, but that's okay. So here, let's call this VM Windows. All right, so I'm going to go with Windows this time around. Okay. So the operating system is actually under the free tier, but I'm going to change the instance type because this one vCPU and 1 gig of RAM may not really serve the purpose, right, that is that I want to use it for. So I'm going to go with T3 medium. So that will give me like 2 CPUs and 4 gig of RAM, which I think still makes sense. And then I'm still going to use our key pair. All right, that's what I'm still going to use. Then I'm going to change, all right, this one to VPC. But then I need to, all right, create another security group because for your Windows, you use RDP to connect to it and not SSH. All right. So if you're connecting to a Linux server, that is where you use SSH protocol. But if you're connecting with a Windows, you use RDP. All right. And your RDP has the right connect using the port 3389. Right. So we have to note that. So let me change this and say, all right, free Win SG, okay, and then the description. So we just say SG to connect to a Windows instance. Okay, so let's give it a name. So security group to connect to Windows instance. All right, so RDP, that's just the only thing we need. You want to be able to connect to it from anywhere, so that's fine. All right, so the 30 gig of RAM, it's okay too. So let's leave it at that. So let's launch this and let's do a few practicals with this. So let's launch it. Okay, instance is launched. So let's wait for it to come up. So it's there. Okay, so it's initializing. So let's click and connect. So RDP client is where we're going to go to. And then in order for you to get the password of your instance, you need to make sure that the key pair that you downloaded, which is the free, all right, the free, this particular one here, all right, this particular one here, all right, this key pair, where is it? Okay, so you must make sure that this particular key pair is where you can get it, okay, because we're going to use it to authenticate with a Windows instance. Because, all right, your Windows does not use SSH to log in, all right? So you need your key pair to be able to decode the password, all right, the administrator's password that you're going to use to connect to your Windows instance. So your key pair is very important. So let's click on get password. So it's going to tell us to upload the key, all right? So you click on upload. And then here you go to downloads, and then the key pair is right here. So you click on it here, and then you decrypt the password, right? So here is our password, all right? So copy that. Now, if you want to connect to a Windows instance, of course, you need what you call a remote desktop client. But for every Windows system, it comes with a remote desktop client. So I'm just going to go here to RDP. All right, and then I'm going to click on it. All right, so it's asking me for the name of the computer, and then I'll copy that right here. So that's the name of the computer, paste it. Okay, so I can expand this in order for me to be able to put the username. So the username is administrator. I'll copy that and paste. Okay, so that's all I need to do. So I click on connect. All right, so it's connecting. It's going to ask me for my password. So I'll click on here, and then I'll put in the password, and then I'll click on OK. All right, so yes, as you can see, we are successfully connected to our Windows instance. All right, so our Windows instance is coming up. We're connecting to it. All right. Okay. So that's a Windows instance in the cloud. All right, so you have a Windows instance in the cloud. But we're going to look at a few things like the volumes. How do we expand the volume? Now, remember, when we created this Windows instance, it had 30 gig, all right, of storage, 30 gig of storage. But of course, you could expand that to maybe 60, to maybe 100, to 200, whichever one, or whatever size you want to expand it to. Okay, we're going to see that shortly. So let's go here to files, and then let's go over here to the species. So if you look at it here, what we have is the 30 gig that we provisioned. All right, but there are two things that I want us to do right now. So the first one is that I want us to expand this hard drive. Now, this is 29 gigs. So let's say we've been given an instruction by our team lead to say, oh, we discovered that there are certain things we want to do, so the 30 gig is not going to be enough. So please kindly expand the hard drive to 50 gig. And then in addition to that, they tell us that, okay, can you please provision an extra storage, maybe around another 30 gig extra, right? Just help us to provision it, and make sure you map it to your Windows instance. You want to have it there. There's some other things you want to use that for. So, for example, that instruction was given to us. So how do we expand this, and then how do we add volume, all right, to this particular instance? Okay, so let's go over to our console and let's see how we can do this. All right, so let's go back to instances right here. So here you have volumes. All right, now if you click on the free windows here and you go to storage from here, now you will see the volume that was provisioned, right? So this is the volume. So you can see there's the size 30 gig of RAM, I said 30 gig of storage rather. So this is the ID of that particular volume. Okay. Now, another thing you must also note when you're creating a volume on AWS is this. Now, if I want to create a volume, another one, and then attach it to this Windows instance, right? I must ensure that the new volume that I provision is in the same availability zone, all right, as the Windows instance. Okay, so for example, my Windows instance is provisioned in EUS2A. So if I provision another volume in EUS2B, for example, it then means that my Windows instance is not going to be able to connect to that volume, all right, because they are not in the same zone. So when you're provisioning a volume, you must make sure that that volume is also connected to the same zone as the instance that you intend to use it for or with, all right? So two things that we want to do: create a new volume and expand, all right, this initial volume. Two things. So let's click on this, on the volume, all right? So this is the initial volume. So let's give it a name so that we can identify it. So we call it free VM win. Okay, so let's call it win1. All right, so we save that. Now the next thing we want to do now is to expand. So how do I expand this? So actions, all right, and then I will click on modify volume, all right, and then I will change that to 50. Okay, now when you're expanding volume, you are allowed to expand, but you cannot shrink it. So which means if I want to reduce it from 30 to 20, that's not allowed, but I can expand it. All right, so I'm going to 50, so modify, and then you click on modify. Now, one thing you must note here is this, that you can modify a volume even if that volume is attached to an instance and that instance is running. It is allowed. All right, so which means you necessarily don't have to stop an instance to do that. Okay, so if the instance is running, you can do the modification while that instance is running. But of course, I think the best practice would be that just stop the instance. But if it's a production system, you may not be able to do that. All right, if it's a production system, so most time, if you want to modify a volume like that, it will be time where there are not, too many activities going on, all right, or too many traffic that has been directed towards that particular instance. So during those free time, when there are no, when the system is not busy, all right, you can, do that expansion. All right, so we expanded that. So let's create a new one also. So now create. So let's just leave this. Let's just do 30. Okay, so 30. So availability zone is A, right? So I need to ensure that. Now we can encrypt this volume, right? So we can encrypt it. And so when you encrypt a volume in AWS, if you want to create a snapshot from that volume, it also means that that snapshot is going to be encrypted. So encryption basically just security, right? You want to ensure that your volume is safe. Nobody can hack into it. People cannot view what data you have on that particular volume. So it's something that is, of course, important, but of course, encryption is not free. Okay, so that would attract extra charge, right? But of course, you can encrypt your volume on AWS. You can do all of that encryption, all right, encrypt your volume, and then, all right, just extra layer of security, okay? So 30 gig, all right, zone A, let's give it a tag. So let's just call, so the tag is going to be the key's name. So the name of that thing now is going to be free. All right, VM, all right, win, all right, let's say 2. So let's create it. Okay, so volume created. So now we need to attach this volume. All right, so let's refresh this. So this one is optimizing at the moment. All right, so it's optimizing. So if you look at this, it says available, so which means it's not been attached to any instance yet. But if you look at all these ones, it says in use because they have been attached to an instance. So this one, we need to attach it to our instance that is running at the moment. All right, so I'll do actions, attach volume. I'll go to where the instance is. So I need to be able to identify it. So this is my instance is running. So I'll click on it. And then I'll attach it. So if you look at it here again, it will tell you that it is now in use because it's been attached already. Okay. Now, somebody may want to ask that, okay, so we've attached it. Does it mean that the volume is going to appear automatically, all right, in my Windows space? Nope, it's not going to appear automatically. So if you go back to the remote desktop and you refresh, the volume doesn't appear automatically. Now, even this one that we expanded from 30 to 50, you will see that that increase didn't just happen. All right, it didn't increase. So what's going on? So I've expanded it to 50. So why am I not seeing 50? All right, in this particular place. Now, if you look at it from the console, it tells you that the size is not 50. All right, but of course, it's still optimizing. So that might take a while for it to, finish optimization. All right, but then even the new one that I just attached is nowhere to be found. I can't find it. Okay, so what's going on? Now in Windows, this is the way it works. Now there's a service in Windows that is called disk management, right? So if you go to comp, MGMT, so computer management. All right, so you click on computer management, and then that will open up a page. All right, a management console page. Now, under here, you have what you call storage, and under storage, you have disk management, all right? So if you click on disk management, all right, you will see that immediately I click on disk management, this guy gave me something to tell me to initialize a new disk. So I'm going to cancel this. Now, can you see? Now look at something here. Now, this is the initial disk with the 30 gig that we provisioned initially. Now we expanded that 30 gig to 50 gig, right? But the system did something. It didn't have the 20 here automatically, right? So the 20 extra is here, so which is unallocated. So I can match this with this. But the 30 gig that we created extra, that one is standing on its own. All right, so which means you cannot add this disk to this one. Okay, so that is standing on its own. So we need to still provision it. We need to initialize it. We need to put it online and all of that. So how do we do this? Now let's start with this one, the 30 gig. So we've expanded it to 50, but of course we are seeing a 20 gig here that shows truly that of course what we did on the console, we can find it right here. Okay, but we need to merge the two together. Okay, so if I right click on this unallocated one, what I need to do first is to create a simple volume or a new simple volume. Now, somebody may want to ask again and say, okay, so the new one that we provisioned here, so but that one is showing us not initialized. So how come this one is not showing not initialized? Since both of them are saying unallocated, that would be a good question. Now, the reason why this is not showing not initialized is because the disk that we expanded was already initialized. All right, it's been provisioned already. There's an operating system that is running on it already. It's a boot, all right, device, right? So what we did was just to increase the size. So it's not a new device, it's not a new hard drive entirely. All right. So what we just did is to just increase the size. All right, and that's why we are not having this not initialized like or that we have here. That's why we're not having it here, because we only basically just expanded it. So all we need to do is just to do what? Take, all right, the new size and then just provision everything, all right, together. So I'll click on this one and then go to new simple volume, click on next, and then go next, next, and finish. Oh, I just made a mistake. What is that mistake? The mistake I made is now I created a new volume. That is not the goal. All right, that's not what we wanted to achieve. Because if you come back here now, you see that there's a new volume of 20, but this guy is what we intended to expand, not to create a new volume. The new volume is the reason why we have this 30 gig. That is supposed to be our new volume. All right, this one is supposed to be merged with this one and not like, creating a separate 20 gig. All right, what we wanted to have was a 50 gig hard drive and a 30 gig backup. That's what we wanted to have. So how do I rectify this? Okay. Now, if I come here to right click on this one, I can extend it, but I can shrink it. But the goal is I want to extend it. But if you look at it here, the extension here is grayed out. So I can extend it right now. But this one, what can I do with it? I can delete it. Okay, so is that what we're supposed to do? Let's find out. So delete volume. Yes, deleted. Okay, so if I go back here, it's kind of disappeared. All right, good. So what do? When I click here, and then we can see that our extend guy is showing up right here. So extend volume. Next. All right, so this is our volume here. Yes, we want to extend it. Next, and then finish. Whoop. So we have the 50 gig right here. Now, that makes sense, right? So we have the 50 gig right here. Okay, so that is how to extend it. So we've done the extension. So if I go back here now and I refresh this, I should have my 50 gig right here. So you can see that my 50 gig is here, it's been provisioned. Now, let's deal with this other guy, right? So right click, initialize it. That's the first thing you want to do. Just go with the default, right? So initialized, it's online, but it's still unallocated. So what do? Right click, and then a new simple volume like we did for that other guy. Next, next, next. You can give it a name that you want. All right, we can call it, all right, backup. Okay, so that'll be fine. So next, and then finish. All right, so we have the backup drive, and then if I come here now, I can see that my 30 gig is right here. Okay, so that's how you had, all right, a disk in Windows. Okay, so now we can make use of the two, all right, of the 2 hard drive. We can expand it. You can expand this one also from your console and all of that. Okay, now let's look at something. Let's play around. Let's open our browser. Let's download something. Okay, let's do a few installations. Right now, I'm going to do the installation in a way. Okay, just to make it a bit faster. So I'm going to go here to Chocolati. There's a package called Chocolati on Windows. Chocolati. All right. Okay, so I'm going to go there. And then I'm going to use this to install a few packages on our system, right? Okay, so let me go here. I need to start up my PowerShell. So I go to PowerShell. Now you can see that this is more like a real system, right? It's just that it's hosted, all right, in the cloud environment. Okay, but it's just more like your normal operating system. All right, so my PowerShell is coming up. So I want to use this Chocolate to install a few applications, all right, on our system. And then we're going to see the AMI and the snapshot in action. All right, so how do I install this Chocolate? So you can scroll down here and, all right, it tells us to first of all run this particular command to check if everything is fine. So let's run that. Let's press enter. All right, so it tells us unrestricted. Now, it tells us here that if you run this and it returns restricted, it says then set this blah, blah, blah to what? Set execution policy to all assigned. All right, that's what it tells us to run. But here it tells us it's unrestricted. So I guess we're good. Okay, so let's copy this and let's install it. All right, so we want to install the Chocolate. So we're going to be using the Chocolate to install things, all right, in this Windows, all right, system. Okay. Okay, so copy. Okay, so enter. So let's do the installation. It should be faster because we're using a cloud system and the internet is pretty good, all right, on AWS. So let's see. It should not take our time. It should install real quick. So let's see that. Going on, it's slow. Okay. All right. So it's installing. Okay. All right. All right. All right. So let's verify if it's been installed. Choco hyphen version. That shows the version of it if it's been installed. All right, so it gave us the version of it. So that tells us that, all right, Chocolate has actually been installed. So let's clear our screen. Now let's install a few softwares using this Chocolate as well. So we go to community package from here. And then let's install a few things. So let's pick this Adobe Reader. I'm going to install it. So I'll copy it, go here, paste it, and then -Y to accept all the defaults. And then I press enter. Okay, so that's installing Adobe Reader for me. Okay, so let's say we want to install Chrome as well. Okay, so let's just copy that and keep it on D. Okay, so it's installing. It's pretty fast to see. Oh my goodness. Wow. Wow. All right. You can see downloading this is what you call the speed of light. Okay. Downloading already. So let's go for it. Let's just wait a few minutes for this guy to install. And then we're just going to install 2 more packages. And then we go to AMI and see how AMI works. All right. Okay. I was actually taking a few moments. All right. So let's just, all right, pause this other thing. So now let's assume we want to install some other stuff. Let's say we want to install Chrome. Okay, so Chrome. Now we want to install Firefox as well. So let me just do space Firefox browser. I want to test if it's going to be able to install these two applications, all right, at the same time. So let's see if that works. All right, we check it. Okay, so that works. So it's picking up the two applications, and then I think it's installing them. Okay. All right, so the two applications are installing. Okay, so let's pause our recording again and let's wait for if the application, for example, if the Firefox or any application that I have installed, if it requires some dependency, the beauty of using the Chocolate is that it's going to install those dependencies for me as well. All right. And then another thing is there are some applications, for example, if you want to install applications like Python, like Terraform, all right. Now, those applications require that you set a path in your environmental variable. All right. Now, if you're using Chocolate, it does all of that for you automatically, right? So it sets the environmental variable for you, sets the path and everything. So you don't have to worry or bother about, all of those things. And that's why I think using the Chocolate, it's a better approach when you're installing all those kind of applications. So it takes care of all of those things, all right, for you. And that's why I think it's okay. So now we have a few applications. So we have Chrome, we have Adobe Reader. Let me look for that. Adobe, where are you? Okay, Adobe. Okay, so we have Adobe Acrobat Reader. So let's pin to taskbar and let us. All right, so we pin it to taskbar. Let's Chrome also. Let's open it up and let's pin it to our taskbar as well. All right, so we pin this to the taskbar also. Okay. All right, so great. Now we have all these applications. Now, the purpose of your AMI is to create, all right, an image from an existing or a running instance. And the goal of that is this. Now, look at all these applications that we've installed. Now, imagine that you have like 10, let's just say 10, let's not even say 100. Imagine you have like 10 additional instances that you also have to install those packages upon. Now, that's going to be a lot of work, all right, installing, the system one after the other, all right? That's going to be a lot of work. Now, I remembered correctly that in the normal on-prem environment, what we do basically is if you want to install anything on, all right, on different systems, what you do is you can put them on a system, and that system is going to act like your application server, so to say, and then you go to all the other systems, you check, all right, you point them to that particular server, and then you pick your files from there, and then you run, and then you install what you want to install, all right? But in the cloud environment, what they have also done is to say, you know what, if you have an AMI, or if you have an instance that is running, and then you need a copy of that instance. Perhaps you have done a few installations on that particular instance, and then you need those installations. You need to deploy, that particular instance with the same installations and everything in other zones or even in other regions. Why not create an AMI and then use that AMI to spin up, all right, other instances? So in that way, the installations you have made on that particular instance is preserved. Okay, so you don't have to go through all that process every time. And that's the purpose of creating an AMI. So in a production environment, that is actually what is obtainable. So you have an instance, all the necessary installations, you put it there, and then you create an image from that instance, and then use that image to start launching, all right, other instances. Now, here's the thing. For example, in a Windows instance, if you create an AMI from this instance, for example, right, now, the password that we generated, if you remember, the password that we got, okay, from our instance here, you have to make sure that that password, you keep it. Because the way it works is this. If you create an image from this particular instance, all right, if you create an image from it, Now that password that you generated, right? This password that you got, decrypt, you must ensure that you keep it. Because for every instance that you create from this instance, you are going to have to use the same password to authenticate into all of those instances. All right. Now, somebody may want to ask, okay, can't I just, all right, just go to this and then click on generate password and put in the key pair? That will not work. All right. So the way this provision is this: if you create an AMI from this particular instance, you must ensure, particularly for Windows instance, you must ensure that you keep that password that you have generated from the initial instance, because that is going to be your password that you're going to be using to authenticate into that particular instance. So we must bear that in mind. Okay. So we must bear that in mind. All right. So let's go to AMI section and let us create an AMI. So what I need to do is to scroll down. I can click here where I have my free windows. All right, I can click there and then go to actions. And then I can go to image and template. So I'll click on that. So I can create an image, all right, from this running instance. So I'll click on create image. So give my image a name. So I can say free VM Win3. Okay, I'll give you that name. So you can give it a description to say an image from instance so and so. At least a description that if anybody should get there, they can understand, all right, what particular purpose that particular AMI is serving. Okay, you must give it a name that is descriptive enough. Sorry, a description that makes a lot of sense, that can tell anybody what exactly the AMI is used for. All right, now here, now there's this option that is called delete and termination. What is delete and termination? Delete and termination is when you create an instance. Now that instance has a drive attached to it, like your hard drive. Now the delete and termination is this. So which means if it is enabled, it means that once that instance is terminated, the hard drive is also going to be deleted. That's what it means. But you can change the behavior to say, you know, anytime I create an instance, you uncheck the delete and termination, which means if I delete my instance, I still keep my volume. So the purpose of that is, or the benefit of that is, the volume can still be attached to a new instance. So which means if I launch a new instance, I may necessarily not create a new volume. I can just use the existing volume. All right, that's the benefit of that. Okay, now if you look at it, so we're creating an image. So this is the boot volume that we have. All right, and then we have also this is the volume that we attached, all right, that we created, and then we attached to our instance. So this is the volume right here. Now we can remove this if we don't want to attach it. So I can just remove this and say, you know what, I don't need that extra volume for this particular image. So just stick with, all right, the initial volume that I created. Okay, and then you can increase the size from here if you want to do that. Okay, so now what is going to happen is this: is going to tag the image and then it's going to create a snapshot. So what is going to happen is that it's going to create a snapshot and then it's going to create an AMI. All right, so let's click on tag. So let's give it a name. So let's call this, all right. So let's call this free VM. All right, Win3. Okay, so let's give it a name, right? Okay, so let's create this. So create. So that looks good. So the AMI is creating. So if I click on this place, that will take me to the AMI page. All right, so I have my AMI here created from my image. All right, so it's pending, it's still creating. Okay. Now, all these things, you necessarily do not have to, like I said, stop your instance. You can create it from a running instance, but ideally, I think it is best to just, all right, make sure that when you want to do this kind of operation, you do it at a time when all right, there are no activity going on the instance, all right, so that you don't disrupt anything, all right, that is going on. Okay, so it's still in the pending state, so we're going to see that how we can do this shortly. So let's see, pending is still pending. And then if you go to snapshots, let's see. Oh, okay, all right, now you can see that I got a message that your remote desktop service section ended because the AMI that I created is creating a copy of a running instance. And that is what I was telling us, that normally, ideally, you were supposed to shut down your instance. Now you can see that that AMI creation is what actually shut down, all right, the instance, because normally you're not expected to have your instance running. Okay, but even if you have it running, you can still create an AMI. All right, but of course, the ideal thing is that you shut it down and then you create your EMI. Okay, so we've been logged out, so we have to log in again, but that's okay. All right, so we don't have any snapshot here. That's fine. So let's go back to AMI. Let's see if it's been created successfully. All right, it's still showing pending. Okay, so we're just going to have to wait for this to move from the pending state to, all right, to the available state. Okay, so we can pause our recording. All right. While we're waiting for this AMI to be in the available state, let's just talk about a few things that we have here. Elastic IPs, let's talk about that. Elastic IP is where if you need a permanent IP address, all right. Now, all this IP address that you have here, okay, this IP address that I have here, if I click on this, you will see here that I have, all right, a public IP address. So which means if I stop this instance and I start it up again, this IP is going to change, all right? So it changes every time, all right? But if you don't want that behavior, you can create an elastic IP and attach it to, all right, your IP still remains the same, all right? So that's how, but the elastic IP is not free, all right? It's not something that is free, but if you provision it and you attach it to a running instance, you don't get charged for it. But if you provision it and it's not attached to anything, you actually get billed, all right, for that. Okay. So if you don't want your IP address to be changing, all right, you can use an elastic IP. But in most cases in production environment, you really don't have, especially when you're doing, maybe you're deploying a web server or things like that. Instead of using an elastic IP, you put your instance behind, all right, a load balancer. All right, your instance is connected via load balancer because you really do not need an elastic IP if you're deploying maybe a web application, because you don't want to be giving your client, all right, IP addresses to be able to communicate with your instance. So for the most part in the production environment, your instances are always behind a load balancer. All right, and then your load balancer is connected to a DNS. All right, so that DNS is what you give to your customers. So things like Amazon.com, all right, and Microsoft.com and things like that. So all of that name is mapped to, a load balancer, and then a load balancer behind it. There are fleets of, instances connected, all right, to it. So in that case, you really may not need an elastic IP. But where your elastic IP address actually is needed is when you have a NAT gateway. All right, a NAT gateway is basically you have instances in a private subnet. So a private subnet means your instance don't have, all right, public IP addresses, and they are not connected directly, all right, to your internet gateway. So, but you want your instances in that private subnet. Now, if they're in the private subnet, it means that they cannot, or nobody can access them from outside. All right, but of course, at the same time, you want those instances to be able to download updates, all right? So which means you as the user, you want those systems, if you need some update, you want to be able to run some update on them. So in a way, all right, let's just say through the back door, you want your instances to be able to connect to the internet, but from the front door, for those who want to connect to it, you're right, via the internet, you want to block off that particular access. So that's where you bring in your NAT gateway. All right, so your NAT gateway is going to be connected to your private subnet, and then, but your NAT gateway will need elastic IP address to function, all right? Because that elastic IP address will still have to connect to your internet gateway for the NAT gateway to do it to work. So in most production environment, we use NAT gateways a lot because most of the web servers that we have access to. We don't even know, all right, the address of those web servers, right? What we just interact with, basically, it's a DNS, all right? So those servers are not exposed to the internet, but behind the scene, they have some kind of connection to the internet, because whatever it is that is running on those servers also needs to download a few updates, all right, online. But basically, what we're trying to do is to restrict access to people, all right, that may want to just access those servers, okay? So that is where your NAT gateway comes in. Now, NAT gateway is also not under the free tier. So which means if you want to deploy a NAT gateway and you want to work with it, you must be ready to pay per hour. So it's not free. Okay. So that's where your Elastic IP address is more, applicable compared to attaching it to an EC2 instance. And here you have the load balancer, which I just mentioned. You have your target group. So your target group is just basically, all the EC2. All right. So am I still audible?
Yes, yes, please.
All right. Okay. I just wanted to be sure because. All right. So that's just basically, what was I saying? Now the Elastic IP. Yeah. So that's where the Elastic IP is more applicable. So for your NAT gateways, but for your EC2 instance, all right, it's just going to be behind the load balancer. So you have the target group, which is where you put all your instance together in one form. Everything is right there. Target group basically connect with your load balancer. So your load balancer needs a fleet of EC2 instance to connect to. So target group basically does that job for you, right? So the target group is just where you group all the EC2 instances together and say, load balancer, these are the EC2 instances that we're giving to you. So your clients, they connect with your DNS. The DNS directs the traffic to the load balancer. The load balancer spreads that request across already different EC2 instance that is available in its own target group. Right, so that's what that does. So auto scaling, that does something more related to what your Kubernetes does, right? Your Kubernetes is used to manage different Docker containers, different ports, and all of that. So auto scaling is also used to manage EC2 instance in an automatic kind of fashion, all right, in AWS. Okay, so it helps you to do things like scaling out and scaling in. So if you have traffic that has gotten to a particular point, you can tell your auto scaling that if the traffic gets to this point, all right, add more instances. Okay, if the traffic goes below this particular point, you can delete some instances. So that's what your auto scaling does. Your Kubernetes also does something similar, all right, to that. Okay, so let's go back to our AMI. Let's see if our guy is up. If now it's in the active state, let's see that. All right, so it's kind of in the active state. Okay, so it's available. So now it's available. So let's see. So here, there are a few things I can do with it. I can go to actions and then copy the AMI. So copy to where? So I can copy it to another region. Can you see that? I can copy this to another region. So which means, if you're working with an organization and then they have they need all this installation in different regions. So all you have to do is just in a particular region, do all your provisioning, create an AMI from the instance, and then you can copy that AMI to another instance. So I can copy this, for example, to, let's say Ireland, for example, right? I can copy, and then I will say copy AMI. So if I go to the Ireland region, I should find my AMI right there. So if you look at it here, it's available here, but if I go over here to the Ireland region where I use, so if I click here, I should find my AMI in that region. So let's see if that is true. Let's verify that. Okay. It's loading up. Loading up, loading up, loading up, loading up, loading up. All right, so you can see, there? So it's still what? It's pending. So because it's still copying. Can you see that? Okay, so the free VM3, that was exactly the name we gave to it. All right, so if you look at it here, instead of the pending, can you see? Copied. Okay. was copied from where? From EUS2. Can you see that? So you can copy your AMI from one region to another. Okay. And that's the benefit of creating an image from your instance. So you don't want to be doing all the installation all over again. So let's deploy this image and let's see how it works. So you can see here. So let's launch instance from this guy. What did you say? Would you already experience this service? I'll do that later. Okay, so we're launching an instance from that AMI. Okay, so let's call this free VM. Let's just say 4. Right. Right, so can you see it picked up the AMI automatically? So that's the name. So we're using the AMI. So now we're not using the normal AMI, right? Which is you can get from the quick start. So if I go to quick start, I'll see my normal AMIs here. But of course, we have our own AMI, so we have to use AMI from the catalog. Is it this? Okay, right, yeah. So this is the AMI that we created by our own self. So I can still go with my T3 medium. Of course, it's going to cost me, but of course, that's okay. T3 medium. Okay, select my key pair, but of course, I need to make sure that the password from the previous guy, I keep it handy. Okay, so here I'll choose my VPC. Existing, we created one earlier, so let's use that. So this one. Okay, so you can see that the 50 gig. Okay, we expanded it earlier, right? You remember? We expanded it, so that's 50. So let's launch it. Let's see if all the installation will be available. So let's check that out. Okay, so it's running already. So this one is still running. So that one is still visible. So we can still connect to that one from here. So if we click on connect, we can still log into it, but we need a password. So you can go to here, RDP client, like get password, get the private key, upload it, all right, and then we can decrypt it. So decrypt the password. So we can copy this. So let's open a notepad to just put the password into so that we don't have to go here every time. Okay. So password copied. So if I go here to this guy, so I can paste it here, okay. And it's trying to connect. So let's go back to, all right, so this connection happening there. All right, so it's connecting, so that's fine. So let's go back to our instance and let's see this new guy we just deployed. So this is the new guy. So we can click here and then this is the IP address. We can go to connect, RDP client. Now, if I click on get password, guess what I'll get? So this is what I'm going to get with 4 minutes. Now that 4 minutes is going to be forever. All right, because you created that instance from an AMI. So that password that you use for the previous instance where you get this AMI from is what you're going to use for all the instance that you generated through that particular AMI. So if you keep going to this place, it's going to tell you it's not available, wait for 4 minutes. That's what you're going to keep getting. All right, so, and that's not what we want. Okay, so this is the previous guy, the previous instance. All right, so let's close that. Okay, let's close that. Okay, so let's open a new RDP section for this new instance that we just launched. So free VM4. All right, so that's it here. So let's connect. And basically what we need is just this DNS name. So let's copy that and let's open another remote desktop connection. And then, all right, so let's replace that. So we're replacing that. So you can see that the IP address is different. We can put a name. The name is, username is administrator. Put that there, connect it. So password, all right. So we're going to just copy that password. So the password, so copy. All right, and then paste, and then click on OK. Now you see that it worked. All right, it worked because it was created from that original instance. So let's see what we have. Let's see what we have. Okay, so it's starting out. Now you can see that there's really no difference, right? everything, even the things we pinned to the tax bar, everything was just exactly the same. All right, like the initial instance was just exactly the same. Okay, so can you see that? Just exactly the same. So that's the purpose, all right, of an AMI. And they use this in production a lot in organizations. They use it because you can imagine, just like what we just did, we copied an AMI from one region to another. That's just what is obtainable in the real world environment, right? Because you can't go to all the new environment and start, creating your instance, creating you can imagine you launching an instance in the London region, for example, and then you go to Ireland, you launch an instance there, you create an AMI for London, you create an AMI for Ireland. That's going to cost you a lot, right? Something you can just do in a particular region, do all the necessary installation, and then copy the AMI, and then begin to just copy it to the different regions, all right, that you want to launch, all right, your system. And that way you save a lot of time, you save a lot of money, and you save a lot of headache. Okay, so you can see that everything was just exactly like we have it in that other system. Okay, and that's one of the benefits of the AMI. All right, so that's all we have for us. Okay, so that's how to use an AMI. Now your snapshot also does the same thing. Okay, if you go to snapshot, we have a snapshot here also, which is also created from that particular image. So when we created the image, you created a snapshot. So if you go over to the snapshot, you can also go to actions, and then you can create an image, all right, from that snapshot. So when you create an image from the snapshot, that image can also be used to launch, all right, an instance. So you just click on create an image from the snapshot, you give it a name, all right, the size is already there. So if you uncheck this and then you create the image, it's going to get the same result that we just got, all right, using the AMI. So the snapshot also does, all right, the same thing. Now, another interesting thing about the EC2 is that the same way you have your lifecycle in S3, if you remember, you also have the lifecycle manager for EC2. So basically, this AMI and this snapshot creation is not something that you also have to do manually. You can also use your lifecycle manager to automate it. All right. So if I click on lifecycle manager, I can say that what I want to create is just an EBS snapshot only, or I want to do an EBS backed AMI policy. So which means, what do you want to do exactly? Do you want me to create a snapshot for you automatically, or do you want me to be creating AMIs for you? All right. So if you look at it, it says automated creation and retention, copy and deletion of snapshots and AMIs. So the same way we can use lifecycle in X3 to move from one storage class to another, we can also use lifecycle here in EC2 to create those AMIs and snapshots for us automatically. So it works the same way. So I can just stick with the last snapshot policy, and then I click on next. So it tells me what's the target resource. I just say, okay, you know what? It's an instance. So I have my instance here. So I can just say the key is name. So name, and then the value. So to fetch the value for me, right? So the value is the instance name is 3-4 something. So let's see, 3. All right, so this is the instance that we created earlier. So VM4, so if you click that, all right, so that's the instance that we want to create a snapshot from. So you can click on add. So that's been added already, all right? So you can give it a description, okay? And then you can tag it, enable it, and then next. Oops, it's asking us for a description, okay? Lifecycle rule. To create snapshots from VM4 instance. Okay. So here we can go to next. And then so you now begin to do a schedule. Okay. So how frequent? So frequencies, do you want to do daily? You want to create snapshot daily? So every 12 hours, every 1 hour, how do you want it? So when should it start? All right, the retention count. All right. So how many snapshots should I keep? Okay, so count, we can say 10. Okay, so it's going to keep 10 of the snapshot. So anything that is more than 10 is going to delete it. So you can also do age. Okay, so age is expired from standard tier out after how many days? So which means if my snapshot is 45 days, you can delete it. So that way it will keep, right, the recent version. So every snapshot that is 45 days, all right, will get deleted. It can be days, it can be weeks, it can be months as well. So you create all of these rules, and then automatically your snapshot gets created. And then you also have some other options. So you can do cross-region copy, enable cross-region copy for this schedule. So which means you can copy it, all right, to other regions. So as it's creating it, all right, for you, you can also do a lifecycle rule to copy what it has created to another region, all right? And then, you can just go ahead and explore all that you have here, okay? So that's how you can also use the lifecycle to automate the AMI and the snapshot creation process. So you don't have to do it manually, okay? So you can also use Lifecycle Manager to do that. So that's the job of that, all right? Okay, so any questions? We're going to stop here. Any questions?